Welcome to our webinar today. We are starting our fifth season of doing these webinars. This is the first one of 2024. So I appreciate everybody that's here live, and I appreciate everybody that's watching these later on YouTube. We've had a good time with these, and one of the things I'd like to just start with is an announcement. As I've been chatting with folks over the last probably year or two, since we went to only one webinar a month, was a lot of people were saying there's probably a little bit too much time in between. There's more topics than what we can more topics than what we have webinars to cover, things that are important for us to cover, and things we want to do. So they were suggesting maybe we do go back to doing a few more webinars. So we've looked at it and we've studied it a little bit, and I would like to announce here before we actually get started that, and I'll do it again at the end. We usually save our next webinar for the end of these, but we'll do this one here first. We're going to start doing webinars. We're going to do 2 a month, and we're going to also make a time change on the second one. I know this will be a little bit confusing. We'll see how it works out. Maybe we change both times to the evening or something at some point. With the pandemic, when we started, it was great to do them during the day, and of course we always have the help of our friends from Italy. Because of the time that we do these right now, we can get those. If we do those here in the evening here in the States, that's the middle of their night. So but we're gonna start doing a webinar on the second Tuesday of every month as well, and we're going to continue to do the last Tuesday of the month at this time, and the second Tuesday of the month we're going to do at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll try that for a while. We'll see how that works. That should help any number of folks that have not been able to attend these live be able to do it, because it's after the workday, hopefully, for most everybody. So and we got kind of a special guest for our very first one, as we're going to have a guest that's really big here in the United States in motorsports. John Doonan is going to join us. He's the president of IMSA. He's going to come and join us, and while we're going to talk IMSA a little bit, and certainly motorsports, but IMSA has a balance of performance program where they use data. It's not AIM data, but it's data, and I'd like to just chat with John about how that's how they've kind of built that into what they're doing, what their plans are for the future, how do they adjust it, and different things like that. So it'll be kind of fun. And he also headed up the program, where they took the NASCAR next generation car over to Le Mans and ran the 24-hour race in France. And so it's I'd like to chat with him about that. That was a big deal for a lot of people, and to take that car over there, prepare it, and then take it over there and run that in that big race was pretty cool. And he was in charge of that entire program. So that will be fun. So that will be fun to talk with John about that. But the bigger announcement here is we're going to start the second Tuesday of every month. We're going to do those at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. So I'd already scheduled them, but I did not want to spam everybody with a bunch of emails saying with each of the new ones that I had scheduled as part of this webinar. So you will get the normal 1 day before and 1 hour before emails for that, but you're not going to get a fresh list of telling you that they were added. So those of you watching this or watching it later on YouTube, throw the second Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern onto your calendar. That would be I think we'll have a good time. We're gonna do technical discussions there as well, but things like this where we can bring in a guest and talk about bigger picture stuff will probably be on the second Tuesday evening ones like this. Okay, let's jump back to the first screen. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I get a lot of questions, and they're fairly straightforward. User profiles, fairly straightforward, and a lot of people are using them. So we're not going to talk about really technical details today about user profiles, but rather the bigger picture of we've got we've got some experts that are joining, some heavy user and experts that are going to join us today and talk about their use of user profiles. And again, not in the button pushing way, but just in the bigger picture of how they use user profiles to make their data analysis more consistent, more efficient, faster, better, more accurate, those kind of things, and then see how they've done it and what the bigger concept of why they've set theirs up this way. So that'll be pretty interesting to watch. So and listen to their reasons for doing that. Matt Romanowski has sent me one of his user profiles. He's not able to join us here today. He's at an event down in Sebring this weekend working. So so I was going to use one of mine and just and talk about my thoughts on user profiles as well. I'm not out in the, doing actual data analysis every day. I do a ton of it, but sitting behind a desk, not in the stress of at the racetrack. So I thought, well, no, we'll use Matt's because that's what he's doing with his, and then I'll talk it through. And I had some chats with him to give me some ideas of what he wanted to do. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to use Matt's as the first one we're going to start with, and we'll bring in the guests here in a little bit. We'll introduce them at that time. So. But the first thing I want to do is let's bring up Race Studio 3. I'm going to talk a little bit about, what are user profiles, real briefly, because I think most everybody understands them pretty well. But, what are they? Why do we use them? Again, brief, and then spend a little bit of time on the how-to. I will click on a couple of things here just to give everybody a quick idea of where things are. There is a couple of little areas where you got to kind of watch yourself, and it's not necessarily super intuitive, and I'll mention those as we walk through. So the first thing, really, user profiles. It really is a way that as you're using your data, maybe one time you go to the track for one type of event or one car, and then you have another whole car with different ECU channels and different things that you want or need to look at on that particular car. You may create two different user profiles, so you don't have to spend the time to go into a graph and change the channels and change the colors and change the layout of everything that you want to look at. You get these certain set ways you want to look at your data. You create a process, and the user profiles are great for that because you can save virtually everything that you set. If it's settable from inside of Race Studio 3 analysis, when you save that user profile, it's saving that, and all the way down to the color of the line widths, the time versus distance. Everything that you do is remembered in those user profiles. So as you set these things and you save those, that's just a really important thing to help you be more efficient with your data analysis. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the way that they show is up here in the tab when you have a test open, up in the upper left corner. You see here it says full Chiquita, which is what Matt names the profile that he shared with me. And then the second half of that tab is the track that you're at. Okay, that's how they work. And in order to change or add to or save, everything's going to be under this little icon right here, right next to right at the end of the icon row. And if I click on that, you're going to see a whole bunch of user profile functionality. The main one, the top one, we'll start there, is save profile. You always want to save your profile. There is no auto save function in Race Studio 3. So if you're clicking along in here and you change a scaling or a color or any of these different things you may change in your Race Studio 3, the way it looks and feels, you add a tab, anything, right? You want to come over and click on the Save Profile button. James Coburn has joined us. There's a link that Tice will maybe share. That James Coburn, we did a webinar with him a while back, and that webinar, it was set up in a way that James was very clear. Every time he would go, he would talk about it, and he would say, okay, make sure you save. It was a big part of what he was doing. So James talked about that quite a bit in that webinar. So know where to save these things and do that often. If you want to create a whole new one, jump in here and create it, get rid of some tabs, do whatever you're going to do, and you can save it as a whole different profile by save profile as. Soon as you click that button, a dialog box opens up. Plug in your new name and save it. I'm going to cancel out of that. So that's one way to duplicate and build on or create two different ones. I use this function quite a bit when I'll have a Roger default user profile, and then I'll have one that's Roger default dark, and I will take the exact same profile. I'll come in and change everything to dark background, adjust the colors of the channels, and then save it with a dark background. So I don't have to even come in and go to the options and go to a dark overall feel. With Ray Studio 3, I can just leave it at what it is, change it once, save it as a second profile, and then have that available to me with a simple quick button push. So that's how you would duplicate them. So they're if we go back into that again, loading profiles, once you save one, they're all going to show up in your list, right? So so at any point, it's to change from profile to profile to profile. Say you had that second car and you want to do something totally different. We're going to talk about multiple profiles here with the users, with our experts as we come together. You just grab it and save it and load it right from here. And as soon as you do, it takes the exact same data file, doesn't even close this data file. It just reloads the saved settings or the user profile that you have saved and does it that way. So very quick and easy to save and load and change these, and it's fairly quick. So kind of handy. The next one I wanted to talk about was and this is one that's a little bit tricky, and some people get a little bit confused at times, is they want to export. They want to take their profile and either export it or import it in. And since you've gotten so used to clicking on this button here and playing along with getting all your options from right here, you think that that's where it would be. But since you're working on a single test, these are the single test functionality of user profiles that we're working on here. If you want to do something more global, importing, exporting, that kind of thing, you have to jump over to the All tab and get back to the database. Then that same looking icon is right here, and this is where you would come in, and then you can come in and import profiles, share one out onto the AIM cloud. You can grab any of these, the one that Matt shared with me. We can export it, we can delete it, and we can share it out onto the AIM cloud. So that is one of the ones that I get the most calls on. I've got an email or two that's written up just for that, ready to send to folks. We've talked about it 5 or 6, 7 times on seminars, and I think Emiliano and the software team are considering changing this to make this in a different area, to make this a little bit more logical. So anyway, if you want to do anything global with your user profiles, you have to get out of the individual test, get back to the main database page, and this is the spot where you will be able to work with your user profiles globally. So keep that in mind. I see Matt has joined us in the chat, so now I can talk a lot of stuff and he cannot answer back. So this will be pretty good. Okay, so I did just want to kind of go over the basics of what are user profiles. Why would you use them? We're going to hear from our guests here in a little bit, talk about the different ways that they do that. And then how do you use them? Saving them, exporting, importing, deleting. Kind of went over those real briefly. We do have several other previous webinars that Tice may have already linked in the chat box. If not, he'll probably do it now. That we spoke directly about user profiles and more the technical aspects of walking through all of those steps. So you have those webinars you can go check back on. If you're watching this later on YouTube, all of those same links will be down in the description for you to take a look at. So perfect. We're going to go, I think at this point, we're get ready to jump over and have our first guest join us. It's going to be David Smith. David Smith has joined us with some seminars in the past. He focuses on dirt kart oval racing, and he has just been doing a fantastic job of getting the local racers down in his neck of the woods, North Carolina, down in the southeast, of dirt kart racing, to understand some of the additional power of the Micron 5 product that most of those folks use, including so far as to incorporating tire temperature data, and in a great collaboration of minds. He watched some of another person we're going to have on a little bit later today, Ray Phillips, who came on and talked about share the loads and calculations of loads on the different corners. And David has done a little bit of work with that, a lot of work with that, and is sharing some of that with the local racers around him. I'm not going to talk too deeply about that. We're going to have him on as another guest co-host here soon, where we'll spell out a little bit more of that in the near future. David, if you would turn on your camera, I see it's on there. Thank you very much.
Hey,
thank you. David is going to chat with us. I'm going to unshare my screen here in just a moment, and then David's going to talk about how he has created some user profiles, and we'll just chat about some different things on that. So let me stop my screen sharing, and David can share his. There you go. That should have worked for you. See if you can share yours, and we will chat about what you have.
Hey, Roger, how are you? And hey, everybody. Thank you for having me on. Let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see it?
We can see it, and we can hear you just fine too.
Nice. So I appreciate you guys having me on, man. Such an honor to have somebody representing dirt kart racing. Yeah, so I use user profiles all the time. I was a big proponent of making a lot of profiles. I would have, especially on like Race Studios 2, I'd have like 10, 12 different profiles saved. But Roger turned me on to, instead of having a lot of profiles, I only have a couple of profiles. But then when you open up each profile, I have a lot of tabs. So in this profile is really scatter plots. And it just has different scatter plots so you can see different things. What I have on the screen here, just kind of like Roger said, I actually built some math channels that are powered by Ray Phillips's math channel for load. And basically, what I have over here on my video thing over here, I have the time and distance graph to the left that shows speed, steering, and FYI, I flipped my steering channel, so the positive numbers are actually left turns, negatives are turning back to the right, just because that's how my brain works.
Whatever works for you. That's the way these things are supposed to be.
Right. Because we're not making right-hand turns, there's not really no need to have it the other way. And underneath that, I have like the load channel that we were talking about overlapped with right front temperature, and then I have one with the right rear. And to the right, I have two scatter plots. I have the right front temperature, and then the on the x-axis, and then right front estimated load on the y-axis, and the same for the right rear underneath it. And really, what I like to see in this is on the scatter plots, I look for certain shapes. Like for instance, you can see load come up, and then when it gets to a point, it starts building temperature really bad, and that's kind of like the exceeding the grip threshold of the tire. Gets a certain amount of load, then it starts sliding. And it's the same information here, but sometimes, man, when you're in a high stress situation where you're trying to do things really fast, sometimes you miss it here, and it's easy to see here, and vice versa. So that's kind of where I have all these different profiles and well, really tabs set up, so you can see the same information just in different ways. Like I have one for steering, load, one for mile per hour and RPM, and just like I have one for like if I have a SmartyCam video with the scatter plot, so you can watch it. I have one for a friction circle. And again, like then I have different profiles for, like for instance, I have my home profile that has, the first one is just a graph. If you just want to see just a graph with nothing else, then I have one with the track map put on it. Then I have one for if you're using a Smarty Cam. And again, it's all about speed and ease at the racetrack because sometimes you only have like 5 to 10 minutes to look at it to get certain amount of information, and then wash tires, get tires back on the go kart because you're running multiple classes. So
Yeah, it's whatever works for you, right? And then and David, like a lot of the people that I've invited here today, are also natural teachers, and they're working with people, and they're very helpful with other folks that are using their AIM data. And one of the important things that they end up, all of these folks end up using these user profiles for is like on this screen that David is sharing right now, like he mentioned that the squiggly lines in the time distance graph is virtually literally the same data that's in your XY plots, but being presented in two different ways. And what may work for you, David, another user may see what they need to see in the other way, so you can help show them and then help them set up their machines to work for them. So that we all appreciate your ability to be out there training and helping and supporting the people that are out there, and coming up with new innovative ways of doing some of these things is pretty important. So thank you for
and,
that.
and you'll be amazed that when you start looking at the same data just viewed differently, you start picking up on little things that you didn't see before. Like for instance, right here, you can start seeing the sidewall deflection in the
Yeah.
tire. You know, things like that. I mean, when you start viewing it different ways, you start seeing things you missed in other ways when you viewed it differently.
Interesting that you say that, because that you see that in the time distance graph, but you do not see that in the XY plot, right? So it's that perfect example. Perfect. Thank you, David. Anything else you'd like to add about ways that you have used these in the past or taught others to use them?
Um, no, I mean that's kind of really it, right? It's just again, like you said, you know, everybody has different flavors, right? Everybody likes different things. So just knowing how to change things around and view data differently um, is a big, powerful tool, man. Because
Yeah.
again, people like to view things differently. People, Matt Romanowski might like the scatter plots better and can see more on the scatter plots than he can graphs and vice
Mhm.
versa.
Mhm.
So, and it's just finding ways in which you like to view it.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And as David's turning his camera and his microphone off, so we move I am actually going to show some Matt's user profile before I move on to our next guest. David is also, I'm super thankful that he came and did this, because David is in the dirt oval world. The people he supports the most are still using pretty heavily Race Studio 2, and David is in the middle of that transition, right? He's using Race Studio 3, showing it, but he always has to bring out Race Studio 2 to help customers that haven't made that switch yet to the new analysis program. So David is learning quickly as well, and I appreciate him agreeing to come on and chat about something that he's maybe not super comfortable with yet, but I know he's using it quite a bit. So thank you, David, for that. I want to talk a little bit about the profile that Matt has set up here. I showed you some things about it when we first started, but I just want to walk through a couple of his tabs and some of his mindset. He's in the chat box, so he can chat a little bit now, but in there, but not live. I chatted with Matt yesterday on a phone call, and Matt has done the same thing that David has, is and ironically opposite of what my gut feeling of how I've used those. We think about the big difference in the way that you might use user profiles. One of which is, I'm going to save a user profile and I'm going to fill this top area up here with tabs, so I don't have to load another profile. I'm just going to have a bunch of tabs up here, and I'm going to walk through these tabs and do the things I need to do or want to do with the data as far as analysis. That is where I started, and I thought that was more handy for me, the way that I do my data analysis. I do a lot of stuff with user questions and training and things like that. Sometimes a little bit different than what a person doing data analysis at trackside under the pressure of that, right? So but so with that, I've actually kind of turned the other way, and I've started to make more user profiles with less tabs but more specific. driver performance has its own tab. Mechanical, vehicle health has its own tab with only 4 or 5 tabs that are very specific to that topic. And since you can change user profiles so quickly, that has become kind of my go-to. And as I spoke to David and Matt, and we'll talk to the other two here in a moment, they've actually turned from being that way first and going to this direction. And I found that to be interesting. And I begged them not to change their mind just because I was going to share how I was doing it. And they didn't. And that's great. I want everybody to think that through and create the user profiles the way that you wish. So the way Matt has done it is that he uses it as a tool instead of a notepad or something on his phone that he can either keep notes in or talk into and make recordings. Making sure that he's covering all the things he needs to do, because Matt works on multiple cars at the track at the same time. He has set up his user profile to come in, download the data, and start on the first tab and work his way across. And his goal is to have a single profile. The laptop is still on top of the car. He's just downloaded the data. He's around the race team, the mechanics that he's working with, the crew chief, and he goes through first the channel report, because that's the one that's critical to him. It's getting the information about over revs and low oil pressures and battery voltages and all the different things that the mechanics may need to work on very quickly. So he has this first tab set up, and this is where he always starts, and he walks through these visually, and he knows the numbers that he needs to see and walks through them and does the reporting and to them if he wants. Maybe he's got this one set up in this way. Just to kind of go back to where we started, let's say you made an adjustment to this. The thing to do is, let's say we wanted to make these instead of just the old Race Studio 2 style of just numbers, we wanted to colorize those as a histogram. Boom, now you can see the high and low values show up a little bit. But here's the only point I'm doing this for is to make sure this little change here, if I was to go the rest of my way, work on this, bail out, load another test, this change would not be saved. So always when you make any change, come up and save the profile. Next time we open this up, this will be what it looks like. So just a quick throwback to where we started. The next thing he likes to go into is a scatter plot. Maybe now he's got the driver and they're going to look at a G sum. They're going to sit down. He's got longitudinal G's here at the bottom, a track map over here on the side where he can see where on the track that they are. So you can look at these break zones. You can see exactly what's happening. The analysis isn't terribly important. It's that he's walking through a process. This is something that he's created that works for him. A typical split report, and being able to click on the map and get the split report to highlight that split. Pretty fast and easy way to work through the data. A time distance plot. He tells me that this is one that he has. Yeah, it's just got the driver basics. It's kind of his home base for the driver performance side. It's got the speed and then the driver inputs, throttle, brake, steering. And he can add or subtract to that for whatever he needs the data analysis he needs to do. If he has a video that he wants to watch with the driver, he's got a data video tab, so he can roll through this. His under oversteer graph that he has shown on in previous webinars quite a bit. Basically just a steering position versus lateral G's across the bottom. And if it starts to hook up here at the end, that means you're throwing more steering and not getting more lateral G. Somewhat related to what David was talking about on his temperatures of his tires versus his lateral G's. This is just the other end of it, the steering wheel position. This is just showing understeer, not necessarily a buildup in tire temperature. Just another way he likes just to show the data. And then he also told me he likes to have one tab that is, if he's got a driver in there and they just want to look at the track real quickly, overlay a couple of laps, see where the driven line differences or something, he puts a tracks tab and has that set up for him to be able to in full screen be able to show that. So that's and he does it all in a single user profile. I'm sure he has more for other things, but this is his go-to. And I just wanted to kind of walk through what Matt has been doing with his as well. So any questions about that, we'll take some of those. I wasn't able to watch and see if Matt was yelling at me for misrepresenting what he does. Doesn't matter now, does it? The with that said, we'll bring up our next guest is Chloe. Chloe Lerin is out there helping motorcycle road racers um, learn and work with their data. She's just been traveling around the country and working around her home base as well, supporting people in these things, answering tons of questions. We really appreciate her help, and I know all of the racers do as well. Chloe, thanks for joining us on this.
Hey guys.
Let me stop my share, and you can share yours. And
yeah, just making sure you're hearing me okay.
I do hear you fine, and don't see your screen yet, but Chloe's going to talk about some things that she does. She kind of attacks this from a couple of different ways. Number one, as a racer herself, as a data engineer on a team, and also as a tuner and some of the work she does inside the industry. So she has a bunch of different ways she looks at it. So Chloe, let me turn it over to you and show us what you do with user profiles.
So I'm assuming that you're seeing my user profile.
I do. Yep, we do see you.
All right.
And your screen.
Cool. Okay, so I am more of the school where I will add as many tabs as I can possibly fit on my screen, rather than switching user profiles. And I'll always use a different user profile for just most of the time the logger that I'm using. So this is a Solo 2DL for a Yamaha R6. And unfortunately, because I'm not always working with a bike that I set up, not every bike is properly set up with the actual functions. So I will have to rebuild a profile with the channels that are coming up for a specific bike. So for example, here, all the ECU / something is the Yamaha profile. In general, or in an ideal world, when everything is set up properly in the configuration, I should be able to use this same profile for every bike that I work for, but it's not always the case. But anyways, I really like to have a pretty complete picture on the first tab. Here it's showing me wheel speeds, RPM, the gear that is selected, and then I can have an idea of user input. So or rider input. So I'm going to have my throttle as well as the actual throttle plate, brake input. And here I do not have shock data, but I have the front suspension and the calculated lean angle. This tends to give me a pretty good picture of what's going on. I also have a very quick snapshot of the electronics and how the ETV map are set up, and then just like basic chassis stuff.
I'm a little concerned. The picture down in the lower left looks like you're racing in a motocross track, not a paved one.
This is
there it is. There it is. I see it now.
This is Shockwalla.
Okay.
Yes,
You were so far zoomed out, it looked like you were out playing in the desert.
It's basically Area 51, right?
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah. So yeah, I really like having all of this just as a quick snapshot. But I also have quick tabs for performance. So here in this case, I created splits. I'm just gonna go back to this. I created splits that are just like different sectors. I don't specifically like to have every single corner as a split, just for simplicity. And I tend to have just like overall sectors that writers talk about. Or in the case of Moto America, I set up my sectors as Moto America sets them up. So that way we can compare laps and we can compare performance with the sheets that Moto America give us for every rider. On the track, I really like to have, so same 4 or 5 sectors. And then this is pretty new, I think, in some of the fairly recent RCG analysis updates. So I have my whole lap information. And really at first I want to look at basic numbers. So min and max RPM, my maximum engine temperature, engine coolant temperature, engine temperature if I have it, and then a quick snapshot of my modes in this case, because I built this profile to help a rider fix a specific issue, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then I have chassis numbers. So I'm going to have my min, max, and average for suspensions, and then min, max for brake pressure as well.
So what you've done there is a little bit, not to get into the technical details of what you're showing, but you have created two different channel reports in and
True.
split
Yes.
it, which I just want to make sure everybody understands what they're seeing here is there's actually two panels of data there. It's not just one, which is again the power of Ray Studio 3 and the way they've built it to be able to show as much data as you might want.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't find it very enjoyable to have to scroll
Yeah, there you go.
whenever I had too many,
Yeah,
and I don't usually open that many sessions. So I use the
multiples.
the width, or
Yeah,
the height of my screen basically for that.
perfect.
Um, so then once I'm looking at my sectors and I have an idea of like how my writer can improve, or where my writer should improve, um, this is just a quick snapshot.
Yeah,
I can then focus on the chassis. So this is using also some of the pretty new features of Ray Studio 3. And I have here, it's the panel, the suspension analysis panel. And again, I only have the front suspension, where I can toggle through histograms, my frequency, and my log sheets. And I like to have everything at once. I like to have a quick glance and just capture everything that's going on. So I like to display my velocities and the suspension positions, and then have an idea of what's going on track as well, because my suspensions are obviously, or the chassis reaction is obviously very dependent on how much I'm braking, lean angle, and just overall rider inputs. And we have a lot of new features with the histogram. So I like to have the complete histogram picture. And here I added a second channel for color, which we can now do. And I'm using the brake pressure. So you can see that the maximum brake pressure is what is like when we're starting, basically there's no velocity. And then everything kind of tends to
trails out.
taper off.
Yeah, trails out.
So
Interesting.
exactly. So I really like that. I also really like the fact that we now have about 100 bars to add resolution. I
If a
was
little
waiting
data,
on that one for a long time.
if a little data is good, a lot is better, right? That's what
Exactly,
that's
exactly.
Chloe's
But I mean, in this case,
thoughts.
it just really adds resolution, which is really good. Um, and I haven't been using the frequencies much, but I'm really glad that they're back, as well as the suspension log sheet. It's always good to have. So moving on from chassis, I have an engine page, which in this case isn't very, very full. There's not that much, but I use this when we have additional sensors. So if we have something like the oil temperature and oil pressure, same thing for the fuel. And that's really going to depend on the bike that I'm working with and the additional sensors that are mounted on it.
So it's interesting the way you've set this up, and I'm sure I'm assuming you share this with others, some of your fellow competitors that you help. You've got it set up with the unit itself, and the way it's set up, probably the ECU protocol.
Mhm.
And then you set it up where, yeah, pick this one because I've got a solo this time, and here are the ways that you have found that are important for you to get the data that you need, whether or not it's going into it deeply. Maybe sometimes you don't need to go into the GPS tab, but boy, you have them available to you if it's something that you want to work on.
Exactly. And I think now with the ACC, the fact that we can add sensors
Yeah,
to the solo 2DL, things are going to start merging towards more of a common user profile, because even like an MXS 1.2 setup is going to have generally 4 sensors. It's going to be a rear and front brake, and it's going to be a rear and front suspension. So everything is merging towards the same set of data, which is making my life a little bit easier. But then the most important for me, and especially for the data engineering job at the track, is really to look at the electronics. So I want to have a good idea of, how my bike is set up as far as ETV, as far as traction control and lift control. And so I created this one just to answer the question where my rider was saying that the bike was pushing in the corner. And the first thing that I want to look at is how my wheel speeds are reacting. So I created this wheel slip calculation, used the min and max to just see when it's turning positive or negative. And I was able to actually quickly see that the rear wheel in some cases, so not here, for example, but right here, the rear wheel was actually spinning a little bit faster than the front wheel in some areas here as well. So this was enabling me to quickly have a good snapshot of it. I also like to have the lean angle in here because a motorcycle is going to have tables that depend on lean angle. So although this is not the lean angle that's used by the ECU, it's the calculated one. I don't think, I'm pretty sure the R6 does not broadcast the IMU data on this one, on the R1. But it's always good to know where in the corner I am, and traction control is always going to be dependent on that type of information. So again, quick snapshot of everything, and then I can always, zoom in the areas of interest.
And you have found that you pretty much have this layout for the solo. Do you have an additional layout for another one that you bring up real quickly, or you found that you've settled pretty much on just this one?
This is really good for the Solo 2DL, the MXS, and for every bike that's going to give me a lot of electronic information. So, okay. It's everything that's that pertains to traction control, lift control. However, I have something for somebody who only has a Solo. So I integrated it here because it's always useful. But somebody who comes to me with only Solo data, so only GPS-based data, I have this very simple page or layout where I'm looking at the GPS speed, the calculated lean angle, because we can still have that, and the GPS longitudinal acceleration that still gives me a pretty good idea of where they get on the gas and where they start braking, or the shape of their braking. Yeah. And we have a scatter also. This is to answer my question. So the scatter are usually going to depend on which channel I'm really investigating. And then I think the most important one is the compare lap. As you can see in the time distance, I have so many channels that are on top of each other that if I were to add a second channel, things get very, very crowded. So I have just a simple compare lap here where I've flipped the brake pressure just to have a continuation. And I use that to compare a couple laps. And I really like the histogram here to look at throttle position and distribution of throttle position. And obviously the map, which we can now have showing the time comparison. I think this was the release from yesterday, and I really, really like that. Yeah. So there we go.
I sure appreciate it. The again, Chloe helps a lot of different people, so there is some of this that she has done. You can unshare that if you wish, and we'll get ready for our next, which will be Ray here in just a moment. The Chloe not only is doing data analysis on her own work, but also helping so many people out there. And again, super thankful that she's able to do that with us and helping others as well.
Yeah, maybe one more note. I had to reinstall Ray Studio, so I don't have a ton of things here, but I do have another profile that we use for King of the Bagger, because in my day-to-day job, we also use Ray Studio 3 for our Harley Davidson baggers. But in this case, the profile has a lot more information. We've added a lot of thermocouples, a lot of pressure sensors, and we also have a complete ECU CAN profile. But it's not something that I get to use at the racetrack with other customers. So
or share publicly on a webinar.
Or share publicly.
But a good sign of exactly the reason why you might have multiple user profiles, even though your normal way of doing business is a single profile and just and multiple tabs. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. If you would unshare yours, we will get ready to bring again. Thanks to Chloe for all the work she does. I know she travels around the country and helps us quite a bit doing things like this, helping users on motorcycles and chatting with others as well, no doubt. But super great that we have folks that are like the people that have joined us here today, plus others that are not only into helping themselves and understanding what they're doing, but also helping others. That's very, very valuable to us. Our next is Ray. Ray has turned on his camera. Thank you, Ray, for joining us. Ray has joined us in webinars, gosh, 7 or 8 webinars in the past, I believe, and always has such great information. Some of the stuff that Ray Ray does comes at it as much from certainly a long-term racer standpoint, but also from a bit of an engineering standpoint, where David talked earlier about the load, calculating load on the corners based on longitudinal lateral G's. So even if you don't have sensors, we can kind of calculate the loads and where they are on the cars. And folks on dirt carts are using some of the stuff that Ray has introduced to us during some of these webinars. Thanks, Ray, for coming. I sure appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Roger.
And I see you've shared your screen, and we can see it just fine. I wanted to bring Ray on because Ray travels around and does a bunch of different work for a lot of different people in a lot of different classes. And the other thing that Ray does quite a bit is through his business. He works with customers that maybe don't have the knowledge or the understanding yet, or don't even know what they want to see yet as far as user profiles and math channels and different things. And it's a service that Ray offers, and we'll have contact information for that if you're watching this later and you might want to chat with Ray about that, getting your computer and your data set up in a cool user profile. So wanted to make sure everybody knew that. Ray, thanks for joining us, and give us a little talk about ways that you use user profiles. Let's start off with the bigger picture of, have you changed how you've used them since we first started, like some of the rest of us have, or is it you pretty much settled into what you wanted and you've been there? Give us a little background.
Well, I'm kind of forced to use them the same way that Matt and Chloe are, really, since I'm always creating profiles for different cars that have different ECUs and different clients. I literally have over 50 profiles now, and probably as many different sets of math channels. So, and that's how I'm able to kind of sell, that service, is I create it for that person and create the math channels and then send it to them and then go over everything. So, this one right here is what I consider a platinum profile, because it's got understeer calculations and wheel slip and all sorts of stuff there. So, this is kind of on the higher end, but there's a very basic one as well. So
I can tell that you've got a lot of tabs when it's got the little double-headed arrows over there where you've ran out of page to view them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But there's really no other way for me to do it.
It's whatever works.
But it does work. It works very well. And basically I've got it kind of set up, so that I can kind of go in order of what I want to see for the most part. But to me, the whole part of having these is ease of use, right? Because it does take time to learn the software and everything. But if you can just open it up and go to what you want to see immediately, like if you're working with a coach or even just coaching yourself, if you want to see, for example, how much time are you spent at full throttle, you can just go to the throttle histogram and see, this particular car only goes up to like 90%. But if I want to compare it to another lap, I could pull it up and see, the difference between the two. So on this person's fast lap, they were at full throttle 59% of the lap, and on the slower lap it was only 57. So yeah. So you can get that information extremely quickly. So what I like to start off with is, I can look at a lap compare. If I'm looking for shapes of traces or things like that, that's a good place to start. But more likely I'm going to go to a split report and see, okay, on this fast lap, all right, there's 0.158 seconds. That was better on lap 3. So I can immediately pull up lap 3, and that is in which sector? That's off sector 4. So that's going to be, this is the alternate for VIR for the runoffs. So you can immediately, like, I can go to the video data comparison and see, okay, was there any kind of difference? Was there a car in front? And then I can just start digging into deeper, what were they doing on the brakes? What are they doing on throttle? Whatever,
The real power of user profiles right there, because you did not have to go into the functions, add a panel, right, get to what you wanted. You have another view of that exact same data saved in a tab that you know where to just click on it and go, and they're right in order.
Right. And having the video side by side now is fantastic, because you can immediately see if there's a car in front or whatever, So, and car placement, that's a big one too.
Yeah.
So another big one that I use is the track maps. And I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to get rid of this one thing. And I got a little tip for track maps, by the way.
Good.
So I have these 4 track maps, and Emiliano, I know you're listening. It'd be great if we had a label of what these are, but you can see what they are by going to the settings and seeing like this is a throttle track map.
They are each named differently. It would be nice to have that labeled right there as well.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So I've got throttle, I've got brake, I've got longitudinal G's, and I've got coasting. So anywhere where there's red, the driver is not on brake or throttle. Big tip I figured out. Okay, if you go to settings, I prefer choosing the line thickness to 1, and then the next one, choose dot size to 5. I find that gives a much better color pattern, so I can see that a lot easier. But like if I want to see, okay, how well is this person trail braking? Well, I can see their brake trace. I can see, this person came off the brakes really kind of before they turned. But you know what? The car actually continued to slow down, and that's because of this coast. So I can see that the driver is at least being patient with throttle application, even if they didn't get the brake release 100% correct. So they're not going to throttle until, they're at that apex, which is what I want to see. So having the longitudinal G's on that track map, is a huge benefit. And really having all this stuff, because I can see, okay, well, that's where they started applying throttle, So visually, it just makes it all a lot easier, right?
And what you've done there is you've just right-clicked and added another panel, and you've sized those to take up the full screen in the 1/4
right
range, right?
Yep.
So that's there's not, there are some automated ways to do certain things, but that is the fast way to get, like Chloe did with her channel reports, is just right click, add a panel, add it, resize it, boom, save it as a user profile, and you're off and running.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I've got all sorts of stuff in here, but I know we're getting close on
Get to
time.
take a couple more minutes. If there's something that you thought you wanted to share, we're okay, and then we'll be done.
Well, if I want to look at like the understeer the car has, I've got the calculations. So one way to look at it is with a histogram. So I can see, okay, I know that anything over like 4 degrees or so with this car ends up being, enough that they want to lift off the throttle. So we are hitting some, but the car's not spending that much time above that point. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. And if we're at 0, as the place where you go from understeer to oversteer, the negative number is being oversteer. Yeah, there's some oversteer, but again, it's small, and the time that the car spends in oversteer is very little. So I would say this car is probably set up pretty well, just by looking at that histogram. Now I can go deeper and look at like an understeer map here and see, okay, well, turn 3, they had some understeer. Turn 4, you have some understeer, which is normal at VIR, very sharp turn. I can see the video. So if I click here, well, there we go. Now the video is placed right there. So, and I can see the numbers, so everything works out really well and easy. I don't have to spend a lot of time recreating the wheel, which if you're doing it by yourself is huge, right? Because you've got to do something on the car, put gas in it, whatever. You want to be able to see your data very quickly, and this allows you to do that.
Time is always short at the track, and what you've done is you've traded preparation time for that time at the track, so you can get to this very quickly. I want to make sure everybody understands that, yeah, he just brought up a histogram that showed understeer oversteer, but there are math channels in there. There is a whole bunch of stuff that is setting that up. It's not just a understeer channel and click the icon, right? So
right.
Ray has done a ton of work ahead of time, and that's one of the services that he provides to get everything set up for everybody.
Yep. So I mean, that's basically it. But yeah, you can kind of see how much depth I can go into if I want to. I don't always do that. It depends on what the focus is.
Perfect. I appreciate that. The so what we've seen here is Ray's is fairly complex on this one. He's probably got others, like you mentioned. He's got 50 some odd, right? So he may have one that is for a client that has a solo that only has GPS channels, and he's going to
Yeah.
work with them on some basic, coasting, or just driver position, car positioning, or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
The power of profiles, where it is whatever you want, right? This is the approach Ray takes to it, a very scientific, engineering based look and feel to help the drivers get through what they want. The drivers he works with want that. It's perfect. So, but what's neat about it is everybody can build these user profiles in ways that they want to, which is very, very nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate it. And Ray is out there just like the others we've talked to. As you heard what Ray was just mentioning there, he is helping users from everywhere. Right? People call him up. He's and they ask him for some help. He's always willing to help and give a hand. I know I have phoned Ray. I know he's at a track somewhere. I've got somebody that's called me with a real basic, quick problem that I can't necessarily get across correctly on the phone, or they just need somebody to check something out real quick. Ray's been able to run over and take care of things for me. So always appreciate Ray in doing things like that. That's always such an important thing. So let me share my screen as we kind of close up what we're doing here. I appreciate everybody coming that joined us. Kind of in closing, I want to announce our next webinar again here shortly, and a change to our webinar schedule. If you're hanging on, please hang on we're going to talk about that on the next slide. But as usual, all of the webinars that we do get placed as soon as I can up on YouTube and made available for everybody to take a look at. So that'll be done a little bit later today. And customer support, it is January, but we're already busy out there at tracks all over the country. Not just us is our aim, customer support folks, but folks like David and Chloe and Ray out there doing helping us as well. Very much appreciate their help, and Matt down there in Sebring even as we speak as well. So give us a holler if you have any needs. We talk about it a lot, that AIM is a support company that happens to sell racing electronics, and I think we live by that every day. And some of our friends and users doing the same exact thought process. So we really appreciate it. I mentioned that we're a little bit of a change in our webinar schedule is starting. We're going to start having webinars not only the last Tuesday of each month like we have been here. We're also going to be doing webinars on the second Tuesday of every month. I talked about it a little bit right when we first started, but our next webinar is a little bit sooner than what you might expect. It's going to be on the second Tuesday of February 13th. And we're also changing the time, and you will get an email 24 hours ahead, and then 1 hour ahead of it. So you will be notified. But we're going to try doing second Tuesday of every month and doing it in the evening to see if we can get some folks like to come in and that can't join us live would like to do a little bit of that. So here we're going to do it. And we're going to start off with a special guest. John Doonan, president of IMSA, is going to join us. IMSA has a pretty big program of using data to do balance of performance and any number of things with their programs, and we're going to talk to John a little bit about that. Obviously, he's not the technical guy, but he'll have the big picture view of it, and John will join us. One of the things that I grabbed that screen capture there on the left during the 24 hours of Daytona this past weekend. I did not know about this page until they mentioned it in the middle of the overnight online race recording they were doing, and they had that screen there, and it was imsa.com /GTP telemetry, and it was just the GTP class, but it was all of the cars, and it was throttle position, their energy remaining on their hybrid motors, their speed, what gear they were in when they were in the pits, changing tires, all those kind of things were all included on this live website, live web page. Thought that was pretty interesting to be able to watch and see and understand when pits were going to happen and stuff like that. Added to the thing, just part of the data that they have on some of the higher classes of the IMSA cars. So we'll talk with John about that. John also was in charge of that garage 84, I think they call it, when Chevrolet NASCAR sent the car to Le Mans for the 24 hours over there. John was the manager of that project. So we'll chat with him a little bit about that as well. well and enjoy that. So join us February 13th, Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll chat with John about some different things in motorsports. Contact information, you've seen all the folks that were just had joined us and talked about some of their different, oops, I forgot Matt's in there, but I think most everybody, hopefully everybody has Matt's contact information, matt@trailbreak.com. But for the other three, there's their email addresses. If you want to get a hold of them and chat about some of the different things that they did, they would probably be able to chat with you about that and give you some more answers or tips, questions on different things that they've done there. So again, I appreciate all the co-hosts coming. I know it's a lot of work to come and do these and get ready for these, so I do appreciate that very much. And with that, we'll call it a day here. Look forward to seeing everybody here February 13th on Tuesday. Looking forward to it. Thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.